lives are being ruined. We don't discuss that here. Infections are being transferred. We don't discuss that here. Maybe the reason we don't discuss HIV is because we are afraid to discuss sex. Or maybe it's because our very strange use of exegetical practices has limited the particular sexual act we will discuss and leave all the rest out. If I hear one more preacher tell me about Leviticus 18:22 by itself, I will just scream. I know what Leviticus 18:22 says. Thou shalt, it is an abomination to lie with a man as with a woman. I know all about Leviticus 18:22. The question is, if you're going to take Leviticus 18:22, will you take the rest of Leviticus? How much of Leviticus do you really want? See, some people just take out the text that confirms what they already prejudicially believe and leave out whatever is personally uncomfortable. You can't just take one verse from Leviticus. You got to take all or none. Leviticus 11 says, thou shalt not eat rabbit, pork, shrimp. If you're going to follow Leviticus, you cannot eat meat that's got blood in it. Therefore, rare or medium steak cannot be engaged in. If you're going to follow Leviticus 18, you cannot have sex with your wife during or 7 days after her menstrual cycle. That's in Leviticus. If you're going to take Leviticus, you got to take all of Leviticus. You got to take Leviticus 25 that says that every 50 years is a Sabbath, a jubilee to the Lord. All debts are forgiven. All prisoners shall be released. What might happen in America if we took jubilee into account? Oh my God, all debts are forgiven and all prisoners are set free. No bank I know observed Leviticus. No judge I know observed Leviticus, but here we are crawling around on Leviticus 18:22. Thou shalt not lie with a man as with a woman. It is an abomination to the Lord. Yes, so is everything else in Leviticus to be observed literally, practically. How much of Leviticus do you want before you realize that I have to ask myself the question, are these practices which might have made some logical sense in the 8th century BC, but if I'm not going to observe all of them, I ought not invoke one of them unless I'm just trying to find the one sexual act of which I am not guilty. So I skip around the ones of which I am guilty, but I can be outspoken on the ones. Oh, I don't like homosexuals, say some people. Well, they might not like you either. But do you love adulterers? Does an adulterer have the right to condemn a homosexual? Do people who molest children have anything to say about same-sex activity? When did that become a more severe sin than any other? I'm not trying to approve, condone, or authorize anything. I'm trying to stop bad exegesis. I'm trying to keep preachers from using the Bible to condone prejudices, which if they kept reading might eventually begin to engulf them as well. You can't stand outside of the Bible and read it from the point of view of that for which you are not guilty. Just keep reading. Or read Romans chapter 1. Another one of these verses. Romans chapter 1. So God gave them over, to a perverse spirit. And because they were given over to a perverse spirit, they became engaged in these same-sex activities. I do not doubt what it said. Just keep reading. Because if you don't feel condemned by Romans 1, 25 and 26, just keep reading. And 2 verses later, what do you have? A malicious spirit, and envy, and gossiping, and backbiting, and pride, and anger, and jealousy. Come on. Are there no preachers guilty of pride, envy? Nobody here wishes that you could do what Dr. Watson just did? None of you? Nobody will take what he just said and rework it and put your twist on it and not mention his name and act as if you are the beneficiary of some divine revelation. Just keep reading, and sooner or later, everything that we are falls under the same condemnation. Why do we not engage on this issue? Perhaps because we don't discuss sex, or perhaps because we don't know how to read the Bible properly. Or perhaps it's because we are too judgmental. Leviticus is where Jesus was writing in the ground when they brought to him a woman who was taken in adultery. A woman. The text in Leviticus says, if you catch a man and a woman in adultery, bring them both. That they both may be stoned, that the abomination may be taken out from Israel. So when Jesus, I'm now, you know, I'm just exegetically exploring. When Jesus was writing in the ground, after they brought the woman who was taken in adultery, I think what he was writing in the ground was, where's the man? How can you catch her in adultery and not catch him? I mean, it does on some levels take two to tango. He was not dancing by himself. That would not have been adultery. Where is the man? We are judgmental. We are quick to say who is good and who is bad, who is right and who is wrong, who is redeemable and who is not. Is it possible that the church does not engage on the issue of AIDS because the church is judgmental? We who ought to be the instruments of grace, the proponents of redemption, the advocates of a second chance, or is there nobody here who is the beneficiary of grace? Nobody here? Conscious of who you were and who you are? Nobody here who can say, I once was lost, but now am found. I was blind, but now nobody? How can forgiven people be so unforgiving? How can folk that God has given a second chance to be so quick to condemn those if in fact what they have done is a sin? Because they have done something. We hold them in contempt because of what they have done. Well, what did they do? What did Vivian Smith do? My church secretary, Vivian Smith, what did she do to get HIV/AIDS, to be HIV positive? She married a man who either was unfaithful to her or had been infected before they got married. Either way, she was guilty of the sin of monogamy. She got HIV in her marital bed. And when she announced that she was HIV positive, you would have thought that she was like the leper in Luke chapter 5. Had to walk through life saying about himself, unclean. Not guilty, unclean. Don't touch her, unclean. Don't show sympathy, unclean. What did she do? She laid down with her husband and she woke up with AIDS. She gave birth to 2 sons. Because she was HIV positive, they were born HIV positive. What did they do? I know preachers, I hope there are none here, who will not do the funeral of someone who has died from an HIV-related disease because they cannot get past the issue of how they contracted it. Did you get this disease in some immoral sexual act? No. Did you get this disease because you were sharing an IV needle? No. Well, how did you get it? I laid down with my husband. Papa was a rolling stone. And wherever it was, he laid his hat. When he brought it home, he brought this with him. Judgmental. Unforgiving, harsh, critical, condemning of some sins. I give you 2 verses to ponder. The first is Luke chapter 5. The second is Romans 12. Luke 5 is the story of a leper. Leprosy was a socially distancing, highly contagious, physically impactful disease. It ate at your body. It didn't kill you in a day. It killed you over days. It drove away your family. It drove off your friends. The only companions that you would have were those who were similarly infected and impacted. And one day, a leper hears that Jesus is passing by and takes a chance on the Lord. He did not say to Jesus, unclean, but. He didn't say, unclean, but will you give me a chance? He just said, you could make me whole if you would. He had ears. He had eyes, and he had memory. He knew what Jesus had done for blind people. Maybe it'll work for a leper. He had seen what it had done for lame people. Maybe it extends to a leper. You could make me whole if you would. Now, Jesus does 2 things. Before he heals him, he touches him. As Dr. Watson would say, you missed that. In Luke 10, Jesus healed lepers from a long distance. So we know that he doesn't have to touch you to heal you. He could have said to this man, what he said to those, you'd go, show yourself to the priest, you are already clean. I can do it long distance if I want to.